Hello, SkyDogCon 5. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Curtis. This is my 5th time speaking at SkyDog. I tend to talk about non-technical stuff, so if you're looking for something that's more along the lines of the human brain, you're in the right place. I also like to have a good time in my talk. So they gave you foam footballs. Those have a usefulness. I have said in many years, if you want my attention, throw something at me, just don't hurt me. The foam footballs are perfect. So if there's for some reason you want me to stop, or you have a question, you can raise your hand or you can throw something at me. My friends will obviously throw something at me. The other thing is, this is SkyDogCon and no one's on the couch. Why is nobody in CouchCon? Go heckle me. It's cool. SkyDogCon is very different. I've always loved that about SkyDogCon. There's plenty of space for people on the couch. You will find me there at some point later, either today or tomorrow or throughout the weekend. So what is this? Everything you know about security is a lie. Again, I talk about sort of very slightly off-kilter topics, and I like to ask the question why a lot. If any of you have kids, you know that kids ask why until you want to throttle them sometimes. You get to the point where you can't answer a question. I sort of got into asking lots of questions about why things were the way they were. And I got to wondering, like, why is it in infosec and web security that we have the OWASP top 10, we know the answers to most of the questions we're asking and the problems we're having, but we continue to have the same problems over and over and over. And if you look at the OWASP top 10, it changes very little over time. Yes, they've changed some of the wording and they've lumped some stuff together, so it looks like those top vulnerabilities are changing, but in reality, they're not. We're still dealing with cross-site scripting. We're still dealing with SQL injection. We're still dealing with input validation issues. And users continue to make the same mistakes that we've been trying to train them for 20 years. You train them, and then they still make the same mistake. You try a different training method, they still make the same mistake. What is it about what we're doing that's not working? Why? And it bugged me for a really long time. And I happened to stumble upon a TED Talk by Dan Pink. If you get a chance, go watch it. It has nothing to do with infosec, but it's a great talk. And I'm borrowing some bits from him to work through this story with you all that we're going to talk about today. So Dan talks about this thing called the candle problem. And if you know the answer to this, please don't yell it out for the rest of the room. Let them work it out on their own. But the idea for the candle problem is I'm going to give you these 3 objects. I'm going to give you a box of tacks, a candle, and a set of matches. And your challenge is...
It's a trick. It looks like a penis.
Yes, it does, but it's bigger than yours. And the trick for you is I want you to mount the candle to the wall above the table.
You said mount.
Yes, I did. Such that the wax does not fall, such that the candle will stay mounted on the wall above the table. Any ideas on solutions? Come on, you guys are smart. Somebody give me a solution. How are you going to do it? You actually found the correct solution right off the bat. Most people start off and they say, well, I'll take the thumbtacks out of the box, I'll tack the candle to the wall. It falls off the wall. Okay, fine, I'll take the matches and I'll burn some of the candle and I'll wax it to the wall. The wax eventually melts and falls off. The correct answer is you take the tacks out of the box, you mount the box to the wall, and you put the candle in it. It's a very non-trivial solution when you really think about it. So this experiment was done by a bunch of economists. It was done by a bunch of social psychologists, and it's been done for 40 years. And oddly enough, the solution to this problem is not terribly hard to find if you give people the right parameters. But it also shows an interesting subset of how your mind works when presented certain kinds of problems. So the modification of this experiment was done by Sam Glucksberg. And what he did is he said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a group of participants, and we're going to break them into 2 groups. The one group, we're going to tell them, we want you to do this candle problem, and we're going to have you establish the norm for the solution. So we're just going to have, just solve the problem. When you solve it, we'll stop the timer, it's done. We just want to know how long it takes. The other group, he gave this incentive model to. He said, if you're in the top 25% of fastest times, we're going to pay you $5. If you know you're in that second group, we're going to pay you $10. And if you're in the fastest group, you're that fastest 5%, we're going to give you $20. So now you had two groups. One group's just trying to solve the problem, and the other group is incentivized with money to solve the problem. So which group do you think beat the problem the fastest?
One getting money. The unincentivized one.
Why the one getting money?
Because they have something to work towards, not just there's a problem that doesn't necessarily benefit me.
Okay. Why the unincentivized one?
Because they have the ability to explore a lot of different options and aren't focused. They didn't do it.
And oddly enough, you're very close. The unincentivized group is, in general, 3.5 minutes faster at solving this problem. Very counterintuitive to what we would think in normal business. We think in the world of business, well, if I want people to do better at something, I'll pay them more money, or I'll give them some incentive to make them go faster. So the original experimenters said, well, maybe this is a function of cost. So they said, well, let's go perform the exact same experiment in India, where the highest incentive turns out to be almost 2 months' worth of salary. The middle incentive is about a month, and the lower incentive is still pretty good pay. Same exact experiment, same exact questions. Same exact outcome occurred. However, the highest paid group actually performed the worst of any group overall in the entire experiment. So the more money you gave people, the worse they performed. It was really, really strange. And again, the social psychologists and the economists looked at this and said, this doesn't make any sense. You know, our entire careers we have spent saying, if you want people to do better, you give them some incentive to go there. You give them carrot and stick kind of movements to go places. And that causes people to do things better. So this flew in the face of years of intuitive thinking about how we got people to do anything. And it's that counterintuitive part of this that got me really thinking about interesting parts of it. Why do we incentivize people to do what they do in business? Why do we incentivize people in the digital space to do something? You know, however it is we do it. What kind of reward we give them? I've talked in the past about how you build communities. I've talked in the past about how you manage different stressful parts. There's very interesting parts of the brain going on here that are matching up with these groups to cause this sort of incentivized, counterintuitive problem. The very interesting part of this is if you perform a slight variation on this experiment, where all you do is take the tax out of the box, the incentivized group destroys everyone every time. That's all you change in the experiment. Remove the tax from the box. And what that does is it causes people to see the box as an object instead of just a receptacle for carrying tax. This is called functional fixedness. People see things for exactly what they are, and they can't move their heads outside of that box. This group in particular, you'll find a lot of people in this room who do pen testing or application security. We tend not to have a lot of functional fixedness. I'm not exactly sure why. This is one of the next questions I really want to dig into, but this group tends not to have functional fixedness. We're the group that looks at duct tape and baling wire as a better way to fix a car than taking it to the mechanic. We fix stuff ourselves. We look at computers and networks and websites as, hey, wow, what does this button do besides being the button that it's labeled for? What can I do with this thing that, you know, someone else isn't going to think of? I can make a blender out of a drill and a pair of scissors. There's no functional fixedness there. It's a really interesting question.
So how about the application of does it work? Would that, anybody? This, one thing that I've observed is this, in the, because it almost is like societal even, you know, like a lot of hackers, obviously we don't necessarily want to fit into a mold, not for the reasons that, it's not like I'm rebelling because I'm a teenager, it's more of the, like if it doesn't work or if it doesn't fit, like just throw it out. Like why do I have to abide by it? Does that make sense? Anybody?
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying.
Idea
Why do I have to use it the way I'm told to use it? Because I want to rebel against being told to use it.
Well, not from a rebellion perspective, right. I guess, but you know, where some people that's what it's about. But for us, it's more or less this harsh reality of is what is there working? Like, does it work? And
I see what you're saying.
if not, or if it's supposed to work this way, what happens when I do this to it?
There's definitely experimental culture there of what if I take this thing and I use it in a different way? Like, for example, earlier today, he needed to reach the roof, and what did he do? He stood on 3 toolboxes. We had a perfectly good ladder available, but we weren't going to use it.
It was too far away.
We're going to use what we've got on hand because we want to get the job done. But it brings up an interesting, what it boils down to, at least in these experiments, is that when we have a task that only requires mechanical skill, i.e. the second part of the experiment, bonuses work exactly as we would expect them to. You don't need to think to solve that problem. It's a mechanical problem. Take part A, put it in slot B, attach part C, move it down the line. Incentives work great when you don't have to do anything that involves any sort of thinking. The moment you add even rudimentary thought or problem solving, the whole incentive model falls to the ground. Interesting concept there, right? You know, you grow up your whole life like, hey, work hard, you know, get an A. Well, I'm asking you to do something non-mechanical, but we're still carrot and sticking that sort of thing. You know, parents, I'm a parent, we tie stuff up. Hey, do A and I'll give you B. You know, a lot of times that's mechanical. Go clean your room. Not real hard to pick your clothes up off the floor and put them in a hamper or something like that. You know, but I look at my 13-year-old now and I say, go make dinner. He may not necessarily know all the steps for making dinner. He's old enough to know how to cook. He can make, you know, simple meals. He's not going to be making, you know, veal saltimbocca, you know, but he can make some fried chicken with vegetables and, you know, some other side. So he can read the instructions and figure it out. He can go in the kitchen and problem solve. But if you carrot and stick the problem, he fails. I experienced this the other night. I was a little short with him, and I said, well, I need you to go make dinner. And he went to make tacos. And before he even browned the meat, he was throwing water in the pan and adding taco sauce. I'm like, whoa. I'd like to not die. Please cook the meat completely. Your dad does not enjoy the runs. This is not fun for me. You know, and when I began to add sort of punishments, like, hey, if you can't do this right, his performance fell precipitously. So a few nights later, earlier this week, my wife and I were going out for our anniversary, and I said, hey, you need to make dinner for your sisters. Your mom and I were leaving. The stuff is on the counter. When you're ready, go take care of it. It wasn't anything simple. It was General Tso's chicken. All I do is take the chicken out, put it on a sheet pan, figure out how to turn on the oven to the right temperature, cook that. You know, we had, you know, vegetables in a bag you could throw in the microwave. So all I do is punch the numbers on it, and rice in a rice cooker. And I just sort of left him to it. And he asked me one question. He said, Dad, where's the preheat button on the oven? There is no preheat button on the oven, son. And instead of, you know, giving him a carrot and stick, I said, well, how do you think you might solve that? He said, well, there's a start button. I said, okay, what happens if you push that? Well, nothing. Okay, what happens if you push that button right next to it? And he pushes it, well, a number comes up. Well, what do you think that number is? Was that the temperature of the oven? Bingo. So he changes the button and he waits and it beeps and he does what he's got to do. And by the time my wife and I left for dinner, he'd made dinner for himself and his sisters.
But he has some base incentives though, which.
The only incentive was to eat.
Well, right, but there's still a base incentive in that problem if you don't have any incentive.
Well,
You
that's,
won't get any-
are we going to argue hierarchy of needs versus,
Right.
No.
No, when you're not gonna solve that same problem at work for no paycheck, right?
But there are problems you do solve at work for no paycheck.
Right, but
Why do you,
it's
if that was the case, why did you,
incentive
yeah, like I said,
without a paycheck.
why do I even have the job? Why do I care?
But I'm talking, and in this case, you are correct in the macro sense of saying, hey, I'm not going to solve a problem without a paycheck. I'm talking more in the micro sense of small carrots and sticks that move us along for discrete tasks. Sort of very much like the candle problem. I've got a discrete task that has to get done. Is that task mechanical or is that task mental? And this data very strongly suggests that anytime we have a mental thinking problem, giving people carrot and stick is going to fail. Okay, so this comes down maybe to some semantics too. One of the ideas I started thinking about was we talk about security a lot. What is really security? Well, it's a mental construct that we use in language, and it has a particular implication. This is the literal definition of security right out of Merriam-Webster. And to a large degree, this lines up to what we talk about all the time as AIC, availability, integrity, and confidentiality. Security has a very specific meaning to people. And then I noticed that, well, wait a minute, it talks about safety a lot. So what's the definition of safety? Safety is just a little different. Safety talks about this freedom from harm and the state of being not dangerous or harmful. And I really latched on to that particular part of the definition. Like, well, wait a minute. When we talk about security to users, we're not really talking about the fact that the thing is confidential or integrity or availability most of the time. Sometimes we are. Most of the time what we're talking about with them, like when we talk about a phishing email or a website, we're talking about this idea of safety. We're saying that this thing is probably, we can't say definitively all the time, probably not actually going to cause you harm. But we use the word security. So I think there's probably a mental disconnect there to some degree with the language that we use with users and what we're thinking about it. So I started thinking about like phishing email. Technically it's secure. It could be confidential. I could have sent it to you encrypted. I can guarantee that it has integrity, that it didn't change in some way. But I can't guarantee that it's safe. Very different things. One being an action and the other being a state. So how you think about that in your mind. So I'm going to do a little experiment here and talk about a few more things. So this is just a regular traffic scene. Anybody get any anxiety over this? Cause any problems? You see anything in here that would bother you?
That guy riding the white line.
Guy riding the white line. Yeah,
White man, hello.
yeah, could be. Oddly enough, you can show pictures just like this to veterans who've recently returned from war zones, and they kind of flip out. They really don't like cars being this. They've been conditioned for a certain activity.
Your skate path, the left is blocked, the right is blocked.
Yeah, it's interesting. So what you consider safe, like right now in this room, we all have very different definitions of what we consider safe and secure. For some people, if I walked into this room carrying a handgun visibly, they would get very nervous about that. For other people, that's okay, whatever. Some of that's your past, some of that's your conditioning, some of that's how you view the situation. Same idea. So how about this one? Problem with this one? Bingo. Anybody notice I'm on the wrong side of the road? This is Australia. I did that on purpose. So the first one's from Europe. It's from somewhere in Western Europe. And the second one is from Australia. They're on the left. Perfectly normal for them. And if you're not thinking about it, you're actually not going to notice the danger until you really start thinking, well, wait a minute, nothing's moving, and oh crap, they're on the wrong side of the road. And I can tell you from personal experience being in London that the first time I got in a London cab and the guy went to the left, I practically pooped my pants. Like, whoa, wrong side. Okay, wait a minute, I'm in London. We're okay. Everyone's going this way. We're okay. And then he made a left turn onto a one-way street and I almost lost it again. And oddly enough, I have that same sort of reaction. There's an interchange in Louisville from the Gene Schneider, the 365 onto 71. There's nothing fancy about it. It's a nice long curve to get one highway to another. There's nothing fancy about it. But every time I go through that curve, I literally start sweating. And the reason is about 5 years ago at about 5:30 in the morning, I was driving my wife's minivan with my son sleeping in the back seat. We were going to meet my cousin because we were going to drive to Dayton to see the air show. We got up early, got in the car, got all our stuff, and began driving. We got halfway to my cousin's house. We were going to meet him and pick him up, and it had rained just a little bit that morning. And I was going just a little too fast. I was about 5 miles over the recommended speed for that curve. And when I hit the top of the curve, the minivan literally spun all the way around. And I bounced off one side and then the other and landed on the other side again. And we walked away, thankfully. No one was hurt. We walked away. But even to this day, especially if there's been a little rain or snow, I go through that, I'm 10 miles an hour through that curve. I don't crap, nope, honk at me all you want. I'm going 10 miles an hour, screw it. I've been conditioned to think that that area is unsafe. So if I'm a user and I've done something like click a phishing mail and I got a virus, why is it that I don't perceive that as being unsafe the second time it shows up? Why are they continuing to do that same action over and over and over. And the same thing with developers. Why do they continue to write code that we know they're going to detect? I suppose that it has to do something with functional fixedness. We are so conditioned, even though these are safety warnings and security warnings, I don't care. I'm clicking the yes button. I'm running that code. I'm clicking OK because I'm so focused on the functional fixedness of the OS and the UI that is presented to me, as well as the fact that in my own mind I'm trying to go through something rather than thinking about it, that I'm making poor choices.
There's also the fact that there's not a lot of consequences.
That depends. Like I've worked places where if you do that, you could get fired. Oddly enough, they almost never get fired, which is the sad part of it. But it's proof that not only do we have carrot and stick, but we don't freaking use it.
Or is that like, if, okay, I click on it, I get a virus, hey, my IT guy will fix it. I don't have anything to worry about.
It's not their problem.
That's part of it too. So there's definitely an ecosystem surrounding this question of how do we get users to make better choices? How do we get developers to make better? How do we up the ante to people that this does not mean security? The only thing that lock has ever meant is that the communication channel between these two things has been to some degree secured in a very specific way. It doesn't make the page safe. There could still be malware on this page. There could still be any number of things that could hurt you. And then on top of that, it doesn't even match across different types of browsers that supposedly follow standards on the web in the same way. They don't match in any way. So even if you standardize in your own company, there's an interesting reaction to that. So again, I was thinking about what, coupled with this, okay, why do I get the sweats every time I turn this corner? Why don't users have that same reaction? And I happened to go find this very interesting video on the internet.
Здесь уже есть такие вагонки, уже люди, и все преемцы показывают, что... И вот, вы слышите, в данный момент работает град по нам.
Notice everybody else runs away.
Вы все слышали, все видели?
Either this guy's got balls of steel, or he's been shot at so much he just doesn't care anymore.
Вот он. Горящий зараза. Вот осколки.
There's pieces of bomb at his feet. And then I asked myself, wait, as the infosec guy, am I the one running in the house, or am I the guy there standing and picking up pieces of bomb? Which one am I? Am I smart enough to say, well, that's not so much danger, it's going to be close. Oh, look, pieces of shrapnel, I'm fine. Or am I the guy going, oh, crud, get in the house now? Which one are you? And that largely depends on, again, this concept of what have I been conditioned to react to when certain events happen. Okay, so this whole thing's going on. Keep in mind, I've been thinking about this for probably about 6 months to a year now. And then Google comes out with this really interesting study that drove this home again. So Google went out and they did this security study where they asked experts and non-experts a bunch of interesting questions. And this was sort of the infographic that caught me. And I'm going to dig into the paper just a little bit with you all without going too deep. But I thought this was really interesting. Like, if I'm a non-expert, the most important thing for me is using antivirus. Of course, if John McAfee were here again this year, he'd love that. And then the second thing is strong passwords. It doesn't matter that I might reuse them, but I want them to be strong, and then I'm only going to go to websites I know, and I'm not going to share any personal information. Those are the things that I think, if I'm not an expert in security, they're going to keep me safe. Well, notice they don't line up at all with the other side. There's no antivirus on the left. The only thing that matters is use strong passwords, and even then, as experts, we think they're less important for the most part. As a large group, we'll use password managers. I can't get my mom to use a password that doesn't involve a word she can remember from the 1950s. Love her to death, but I guarantee you she has the same password everywhere she goes on the internet. I'd love her to use a password manager. We use two-factor auth. They most of the time don't even have any idea what it is. And if you're in a corporation, the only way you get people to use two-factor auth is if you make them. You go to their desk and you staple the RSA key to their hand or something. They don't care. So again, like I said, there was a really interesting paper, so I dug into it a little more. And this is the larger this is the actual data from the paper that infographic was built off of. So what this shows is if the item was mentioned by at least 5% of each group, 5% is not very big. Most experts said they would keep their system updated, use two-factor auth to stay safe. Non-experts, of course, emphasize antivirus and strong passwords. The experts being the dark bars and the non-experts being the whiter bars for anyone who can't read it in the back, which would be really bad because it's not that far back. Get an eye exam. But yeah, you can see, this one makes me laugh like crazy. Use Linux. It's a little tiny one. Use Linux. Like even the experts are saying, okay, that doesn't matter so much. As much as we like to, the whole use Linux argument. What I find funny is check if it's HTTPS. Sort of in the middle there as well. And then the antivirus one is hilarious because it's just so largely different, as well as update your system. They could care less about updating their systems most of the time. Again, it's that safety, security, functional disconnect. Hey, I've got a strong password. What's someone going to do to me? So,
Well, as an industry, we've done a bad, and as security experts, we've done a bad job of doing that.
we've tried very hard.
Microsoft breaks two things for everything they fix.
That's true. They do break a lot for everything they
Great
fix.
marketing campaign of we just don't get a virus. So there is a perception of by updating and breaking.
There's definitely a perception that updating can be dangerous to the software I really love or that I use to do my job. What I find interesting is, Microsoft, turned on automatic updates for critical stuff in Windows XP, and it sort of filled around. And then in Windows 10, they upped the ante on that. Now people are really pissed. Like, hey, stop fixing my computer.
Another industry problem we made is we combine feature enhancements with security patches and all the same thing. And people like how the software works, of course they're not going to change it.
Yeah, and for the video, the thing that was brought up is he said that we're coupling feature enhancement with security updates. Some software makers have decoupled those things, maybe not very well, but to a large degree they've tried to decouple them. And then you have users saying, well, I'm paying you, why are you not giving me the cool free stuff? But then on the web, you have exactly the opposite. A lot of us are doing agile frameworks at our places of business, and we're putting out a new version of a website, in some places, daily. You're rolling out new features to users as fast as you can. Are you rolling out security fixes as fast? Are you code scanning as fast? Are you verifying any of the security steps while you do that? Maybe you do one security sprint for every 5 development sprints. Maybe that covers it. I don't know. Again, that's an area of research that really needs to be dug into. And I'm going to show you guys one more chart. There's like 50 charts in this report, and they're really interesting. This is the other one that really grabbed my attention. So this is the percentage difference of experts and non-experts who mention this specific security thing when asked. What are the top 3 things to do to stay safe online? So what this measures is if it's above the line, a positive difference, were mentioned more by experts, and if it's below the line, it was mentioned more by non-experts. So again, use Linux, the little tiny sucker there, just falls below. So what I find funny is it was mentioned more by non-experts. Like, okay, they have an idea what Linux is. At least they know. But you've got the sort of top 7 things there for experts. Update, two-factor auth, password manager, unique password, and check if HTTPS. That's what we tend to do. So again, why are we not translating some of this stuff to users? Like really verified software, that's really freaking hard. Even as an expert, I'm going to tell you that's hard. Unless you know the intricacies of digital signatures, you know how to verify them. It's not hard to sign something and throw it on somebody's box. Oh, look, digital signature, run. Or Authenticode on Windows for the longest time. I could sign something with thought and just, it would run. Even though it was the lowest level of security certificate in the world. It didn't matter. So to some degree, our own security measures were encouraging people to make really poor security decisions by literally not looking. So we had conditioned them to follow a functional path to make a fixed given choice. So literally like, hey, here's your foot gun. Have a nice day. So now we come down to how do we change that sort of set of behavior? And this goes, question.
I was mentioning, one thing that non-experts versus experts in the field, we don't sort of buy into what we see in marketing. So you'll see these television advertisements for little USB keys you pop in your computer. poll these people, that's what they see. You don't see commercials that pop up and say, oh yeah, update your system, fix two-factor authentication. So these non-experts, what they see is just, well, even the phone calls that you get saying, oh yeah, hello random person, there's a virus in your computer, we're gonna fix it for you. And it's never someone they never met. So that's what they see.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, that marketing has a very different effect on experts. But that's true of every industry. My dad's a doctor, and I guarantee you the commercials for drugs that come on TV have a very different visceral sort of effect for him than they do for me, even though I'm a med school dropout. I look at a lot of that stuff and go, okay, whatever. But, I guarantee you there are people going, oh my God, I have this I'm calling my doctor right now, give me this drug. So yeah, to some degree, there's definitely an expertise gap there. And that's a very interesting point as well that I haven't dug into a whole lot. Yeah, I think we all have, to some degree, depending on your job, you may even have vendor fatigue. Like, how often does a vendor call you and try and sell you something? And then of course, maybe you got into one where you bought something and didn't exactly do what you wanted it to do, or it didn't match up to what they promised it was going to do. To me, that's why we do POCs as much as we do where I am, and they're really long. It's like, we're going to beat the crap out of this thing, and it's going to meet everything they've ever told us it's going to do, or we're done. Even if it's something small, like, oh, that pixel's off, not buying. Okay, whatever. Does it solve 80-20 problem for me? So yeah, we do look at it differently. But jumping back to where I was, so in the candle problem and in Dan Pink's talk, he talks about how do we get people out of this functional fixedness issue with carrot and stick incentives that cause failure or cause them to poorly perform. And it comes down to three things. Autonomy, which is the ability for you to have direction over your own life. We want to have that control. Mastery, it's the desire to get better at something. And purpose, the idea that whatever it is I'm doing is connected to something that might be larger than me. And he gives some really great examples of some companies that use really autonomy. He only really goes into autonomy. I'm going to try and talk a little bit more about the other ones as well. But in autonomy, he talks about Atlassian. Any guys use Jira? That's Atlassian. Jira is built by Atlassian. Atlassian has this really interesting thing every year where they look at their devs and they go, all right, for the next 24 hours, you do whatever you want. We're going to pay you. The only rule is you have to deliver something the next day. They call it a FedEx day because you got to deliver the next day. And most of their innovation has come out of this little funny pocket by giving people the autonomy to choose what they want to work on. So a lot of their newest features, a lot of their user-facing updates that users really love come out of this autonomy thing. Of course, Google's famous for it for its 20% time. But the idea being that if you give people autonomy to solve their problem or to scratch their itch, they're going to go scratch an interesting itch. Okay, so how does that relate to what I'm talking about? Well, to a large degree, when we build security programs, we're trying to build them functionally, but we're failing in the idea that I mentioned earlier, is that if the minute you have even rudimentary mental task, your successful failure is going to drop. Or yeah, your success rate will drop because it's not direct, it's not rudimentary. They actually have to think, well, wait a minute, is this a phishing mail? In some cases, that's not easy to do. Or, hey, the guy on the phone is not Microsoft. I love, a little side tangent, my dad, when he gets those calls, he literally sits in his easy chair. He doesn't even walk over to his computer. He just sits in his chair and talks to the guy. And I almost lost it one night. He was sitting there and he's about 10 minutes in and the guy goes, you have a Windows computer? No, I have a Dell. No, you have a Windows computer. No, I have a Dell. It says Dell right there. No, your computer's no, it's a Dell. I'm telling you, it says Dell on my computer. The poor guy was practically crying on the other end of the line. My dad has that bent, and I think that's probably where I get my security side. But I think if we could find a way to better give users some autonomy and cause them to actually take a thinking moment over, hey, what does this really mean to my urge to self-direct in my job, maybe they'll make better choices. We're going to take the carrot and stick out of it. It's, the idea that, oh, I clicked the URL and I got the blocking page. That's sort of carrot and stick. Like, oh, I'm not allowed to go here. In some instances I can understand, like, hey, we don't want them going to porn sites or other kinds of stuff. But oddly enough, I can't even get to Twitter where I work. Like, really? It's Twitter, for crap's sake. It's suddenly going to attack us and we're all going to lose. Okay, whatever. To the subject of mastery, We want people to master these skills. Mastery is the idea that I'm going to get better and better at something. How do we help users become better at this? If we give them autonomy, that means they have to have some level of skill. And if they've got some level of skill, how do we increase that skill level so that as the attackers raise their bar, that our users then raise their bar, or our devs raise their bar? We're asking them to be better. I really like the mastery one, and I work on an enterprise application security team, and when I talk to developers, this is how I talk about it. They already have a lot of autonomy, but they don't really care about security because it doesn't fit into some skill they're trying to develop. But if I sell it as a, hey, here's this interesting thing you can do, and you can get better and better at it, and you'll gain some mastery over this thing and gain a skill you don't already have, more often than not, they buy into the idea. So now they've got two parts. They've got at least autonomy and mastery going on there. Again, with users, how can we incentivize a user so that when they do make the right security choices or alert us to security issues, that they're gaining a skill level that's driving that? Because that bottom part is that purpose. We all want to have purpose for what we do. Some of us might have jobs where we kind of hate it because we're stuck somewhere. Some of us are very lucky to have jobs that we think we're doing something that matters. And that's a large part of purpose. Even if it's just a small amount of purpose. How do we get users to tap into that? How do we get developers to tap into that idea that this thing that I have control over and that I'm mastering is now connected to an end state that I want to be at? Because when you tie these three things together, and I love it that the acronym here is AMP, we're adding AMP to what they're doing. We're giving them a reason to make a positive choice. So now we're getting out of this idea of I have a rudimentary task where I put slot A in tab B and I move it down the line to make a security choice to the reality of what it is. We're talking about a grayscale here. Hey, I'm going to go to a website and I need to find some information. Okay, there's a link here. Maybe now I hover over it and look at the URL before I actually click on it. Or I get a mail I'm a little suspicious of. I know how to look into it a little more and make a decision. And even if I think it's a little bit off, I know where I can go ask someone for help. Most of us in this room are capable of looking at that and making the right decision because we're just screwy enough to try it, to do it to people too. We're usually the guys going, you know what, I'm going to take this really awesome phishing mail, I'm going to do this. And one of the guys I'm here with told me a great story about what he did. He did, the place he worked had this incentive program. And so what he did is he took the incentive program email and he basically screen scraped it and turned it into a phishing mail and then sent it out. The downside was then people weren't clicking on the real mail when they got it and the company got really mad. Like, hey, people aren't clicking on this thing that helps them do whatever. He's like, I'm sorry, but my point worked. I can fool people. So to some degree, again, foot gun, we shot ourselves maybe a little bit on that one. So, again, for those who don't know me, I'm Curtis. You can find me at CurtisKO on Twitter. My nickname here at SkyDogCon is Neuro. It's not Neo. I'm not this guy. It's this thing, Neuro. I care about brains. And as a small aside, today is actually my 16th wedding anniversary, and so I sent my wife some boring selfies this morning. But I was a nice guy, and this is my plug to her. When she sees this online, I sent her some nice flowers. Questions, comments, smart remarks?
I just wanted to say, Curtis, you're a friend, and I found this presentation very moving. And when I say moving, I mean, like, I wanted to move far away from this place. I didn't, because I'm your friend. I think if anybody else was moved like I was at this presentation, they should go to football, say, Curtis.
Oh, come on. One football? And he's my roommate. Yay! In the back. I have not. So the question was, have I studied Proceed versus actual control in the medical community? I have not. Admittedly, I have a bias against surgeons. Again, my dad's a doctor, and there's a lot of surgeons, so I kind of wanted to punch in the face. Like, you are not God. You're a very good doctor, but you're not God. So, no, I haven't looked into that one yet. Thanks for the pointer. I'll take a look at that.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you very much. She hasn't killed me yet, so it's not bad. Yeah, yet being the operative word. I'm not at home on my 16th anniversary. All right, cool. You guys want to talk to me? I'll be around for the rest of the con. Other than that, go forth and be awesome.